Throughout the years, racism has emerged as a very problematic issue within America's police system. Because of these biases, many African Americans have lost trust within the law enforcement system. This eminent problem has led me to my research question, which is, how is racism present throughout the law enforcement in America, and what are ways to resolve this? Law enforcement clearly indicates that racism still persists through racial profiling and awful murders of African Americans, which is unacceptable, and many people need to take action at the systemic level to enforce justice and equality for all citizens, no matter what their skin color is. Many people often find it difficult to contradict a police officer's claims because they are highly respected individuals within the community. They go through endless hours of training and education to protect this nation, which is very difficult to refute in a situation where they claim they were protecting themselves from harm or danger. However, there are countless incidents that have occurred over the years that indicate that racism and police brutality are still very real in the United States of America. Racial profiling is one example of how police officers have an individual racist bias against people of color. According to Explaining and Eliminating Racial Profiling is where there is a stop and search of cars based on a person's race. This racial profiling is encouraged at an institutional level where the DEA had profiled drug couriers as people with wrappers in their cars, out-of-state license plates, and dark skin. Studies have shown that these biases have not actually led to more efficient crime control. In fact, because of these racial biases, crime control is actually less efficient in comparison to random stops. Therefore, it is necessary to indicate to people that racial profiling must come to an end and everyone deserves to be treated equally. Not only does racial profiling indicate to Americans that racism is still present in our law enforcement agencies, but police brutality that has occurred over the years also strongly indicates all of the harm our agencies have done to minorities in our very own country. Oftentimes, police who are faced with these awful accusations of police brutality have a similar narrative, claiming they were threatened, afraid, and were attacked when they decided to shoot an unarmed person of color. According to Truth and Consequences, these narratives are almost always accepted with no one questioning their story. However, there has been plenty of video evidence that has revealed that there are countless incidents of police brutality. Some of these brutal incidents include those against Rodney King and William Scott, which show our law enforcement agencies abusing their power against a person of color. When these videos of abuse were released, the public still continues to find this brutal behavior by law enforcement to be shocking, even though there is an evident pattern within this system. This indicates the unconscious bias that both the public and police departments have regarding police brutality against people of color. According to both Explaining and Eliminating Racial Profiling and Criminal Justice in Action, these biases that are carried out by law enforcement officers contribute to a mistrust in the police in a minority neighborhoods and communities. When these groups see that officers believe that they are above the law, they often are more likely to protect criminal behavior. Throughout the National Police Misconduct Statistics and Reporting Project, their research indicates that there are four main themes that can be found within minority communities: contempt for law enforcement, suspicion of law enforcement as agents of brutality, and lastly, respecting law enforcement. Many people believe that there are more bad cops in law enforcement if statistics revealed those who chose to look the other way, help cover up an incident, or are bystanders to an illegal incident. Since these minority groups have so much mistrust in police officers, it is crucial for these agencies to take into account race to ensure safety and equality for everyone. A majority of these individuals throughout these communities have negative perspectives upon law enforcement because of all the police brutality cases have been swept under the rug. This has begun to instill fear and uncertainty within these communities of who they believe is really willing to help and protect them. Because these incidents have been brought to light, different organizations like the NAACP and the ACLU have brought lawsuits against these legal agencies to try and change these racial biases at a systemic level. These lawsuits have caused for a banning of racial profiling in law enforcement agencies. Not only have large organizations taken action to fight against racial profiling and police brutality, but law enforcement agencies themselves have also been working hard to weed out the quote-unquote bad apples to ensure that they are protecting and helping everyone no matter their skin color. Some of the actions that police departments are taking to fight racial biases include increasing police sensitivity training, higher education requirements for the officers, along with community policing. The Department of Justice is also investigating departments that have exhibited police brutality in the past or the present. Investigative actions have not been the only steps that have been taken in order to ensure safety for everyone. Police departments have also begun to implement technology in the forms of body and car cameras to record actions of police officers taken in their daily lives in order to hold them accountable for their actions. Implementing technology throughout law enforcement begins to hold those who have these racial biases accountable. However, it is still necessary for more action to overcome this prejudice. According to Truth and Consequences, more education and exposure to minorities is necessary in order to change these individual biases and influence their future actions. Overall, it is evident that racism is still present in America's law enforcement system. Even though there have been monumental steps taken in the form of technology to discourage racism, it is still necessary for these agencies to continue to attack racism head-on with more education to expose these minority groups to change these racist biases.